Welcome to the UN CEFACT Global Trust Registry project. This is the time which is hopefully friendly towards European countries and time zones. So the morning in Europe and sort of Central Europe and UTC type time zones. Tomorrow we'll have one for the US, the West Coast and Canada and so on. We have a few little preambles that we'll go through before we do a little bit of introduction. So there's a general code of conduct and intellectual property rules for UN CEFACT projects. They are available to you. I've actually posted on the chat for this session the link to this deck. If you want to open the deck, you're very welcome to do so. And it has those two links in it. They're very simple codes of conduct. That most of those rules are in front of you right now. The IPR rules are very familiar to all of you, I'm sure, as well. They are a royalty-free open standard, if you will, for everything that we produce under UN CEFACT. So that's the kind of way we participate. I think each of you has either accepted the terms and conditions, applied to be an expert, or already are an expert on this call. I think that's the state of play. Well, we may have a few people arriving later who haven't achieved that yet, but they're very welcome to come as sort of observers and to make comments and so on, but they can't actually be thought of as a contributor because of that. The agenda we're going to go through today is a quick bit of introductions, and then we'll do a quick previous meeting recap, quick look at actions and progress and what we've been doing, and then hopefully we'll get to the guts of some of the stuff that Joe's been looking at. I think we'll probably spend a bit of time with Alina and with Sankashan because they've done some stuff that's a bit substantive. So we will see how many of that 22 minutes we have at the end. The idea is to finish at 10 minutes to the hour to give you time to get to your next meeting, which typically starts at the beginning of the next hour. 2 weeks ago, we had the two meetings that we had were discussing sort of governance requirements and the body of work that had been done by Alina in particular on that. So Alina led the session that was at this time of the week, 2 weeks ago. There's a substantive document that's available in our project deliveries folder. We can show you where that is in a second if you wish to look at it. It's deliverable number 4 in the way we've numbered these things. You'll see a little logical model and plan of those things in a second. And we talked about a few other things. Alex Tweedale was on the call as well, and he was talking about the digital identity anchor specification, and Sankashan is also on this call at the moment, was showing his readiness checklist that he's done a little bit more work on since then. In the meeting that we had a few hours after that, that is sort of 17 hours from now, more or less, we had a sort of repeat to some extent. We didn't have Alina because that's a sort of midnight or 2 a.m. in the morning or something in Spain, and went through some of the same content. We had a few different people attending. So Steve Capel, if you know Steve, he's the co-chair of the, or vice chair, sorry, of the UN CEFACT Bureau. And he's also the lead of the UNTP project, the United Nations Transparency Protocol project. And if you were in Geneva with Alina back in July, you'd have probably seen Steve Capel doing some of the work on the panels. So Steve was there, and we were talking about how we might incorporate a body of work. I'll show you that in a second. That's to do with the digital identity specification that currently exists. That's under the UNTP GitLab environment. And we also talked about the way we might call the thing the project recommends be created. So the Global Trust Registry is the name of this project. Causes all sorts of conniptions with people about just how big is your ambition. You want to get a registry of the whole of trust for the world, which is very laudable, but very difficult to achieve. So we've decided that the thing we're going to build is going to be something like a global registrar information directory, which, as all tech people like to do, that gets you the GRID or grid. The thing we're going to recommend is a grid. The project itself will probably keep the same name because it's just hard to change the UN CEFACT a project brief and documents to set this up. Hope that makes sense. By the way, interrupt me, put your hands up and whatever else to attract my attention. I'll stop shortly, I hope, and hand over to some other people. This is a thing we created after last week's meeting. It's a list of actions. This list of actions actually comes from a kind of worksheet, which I think is this one. This is like a spreadsheet. It's just a Google sheet. And what we're using it for is if we've got some substantive actions that we want to work on, we'll add it into here. We'll add in who the actionee is, and we'll sort of track the action through. That is basically the same as the same as this slide. It's just that this slide automatically gets feed in from that thing. So I've talked with Steve about the best way to do what we're doing. I can show you we've actually kind of done that. That will be actions for myself and for Sankishan, number one, and the one that we agreed the next day, which is 03-2, not 02-1. Alina, you've got some ideas which we'll hear in a second about how to handle these governance requirements in these two documents. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yes.
Sankishan, you've put in a preamble into the document that you created, and I've seen that, so thank you for that. I've, I guess, got a plan about the glossary. I'll share you that with you in a second about how to do the project glossary that's shared across the whole project and how we might use that going forward. And I did upload the minutes in an hour or so. I don't know why that action is there for. I guess it's so I could close something. Always put a list, always put an action in a list that you can close for sure, so you feel like there's progress being made. So let's talk about briefly, and that means I can stop talking, about what people have been doing over the last couple of weeks. So I'll hand the mic to you, Sankishan, and then you can give it to Alina, and then eventually I'll come back to you.
Okay. I think I've been focused on two things. One is ensuring that the checklist that I had built up has more context, because previously it did not have any context. And in the last meeting, there was a bit of question in terms of who is it for, how are we going to use it, how are we going to keep on maintaining it, and so forth. So now there's trying to write context in how the documents, other documents have, was very troublesome, to say the least, because apparently it's a kind of text that I'm not very familiar writing. Really cool. It was a learning experience.
So Sankishan, you were saying it was challenging to write the preamble for the document. Is that what you were saying? It's sort of not easy to understand.
Yeah, because I have not actually written preamble in this format. I'm in a much more academic format preamble writing. So writing this in a manner that you have done for the other documents took me some time to figure out exactly how you are laying out the text.
Okay. Okay.
I think this is my best effort at this point, and if you want to change it, I'll make changes as suggestions come.
Personally, I think it's a good addition. So I thank you. That was what I was looking for, and we can talk. You and I, and collectively as a group, we can talk about how we're looking at managing the content and the documents themselves going forward. Alina, you've been doing quite a bit of work as well. I'll hand over to you.
Hi. Hi again. Yes, since Hans is new here, I would like to explain him a little bit exactly what we were doing in the past few months or weeks. So I don't know if you had the chance to have a look at the documents we created by now.
Alina, I'm still struggling to get access to these documents. I have opened a lot of different links, but I got access to the UNECE Global Trust Registry website in the usual UN style. I have
okay, thank you, John. Yes, maybe this
got
will help
access to the project calendar.
Let me see if this will help. I'll put it in the chat right now. Hans,
okay,
you can wave your arms around if it actually works. If this works, it gives you a link that will open the folder, the Google Drive folder, that contains
just to make sure that everybody understands what we are doing exactly. So
I just opened the UNECE Global Trust Registry project slide deck.
Yes, that will.
Let me just include that in my.
So
in
this meeting, there's a chat, comments, and in that
that
chat,
I have open. Yeah, hang on.
okay, so we were working on the draft of the recommendation, and we agreed that it would be the structure would be the one you can see on the screen. So like the first section, eligibility criteria for the authoritative registers. So I was working on the requirements that the registers, the authoritative national registers of the UN member states would have to fulfill or to meet. in order to be a part of the GTR, which is not a proper register, but as John was explaining, a directory or a list of registers. This is very important to clarify, since even most of my colleagues thought that we aim to create a huge register with a database and grant access to national databases, which would not even be possible. Okay, so the second, so I was working on this eligibility criteria for the authoritative registers. Is anybody can comment or give any ideas? This is still an open question. We also
just pause for 1 second. I'll show for Hans and maybe
Yes.
Harmanson as well.
Yes.
This is the document you all have access to. It's a bit slow to load. And it has a body of work that was actually the first substantive body of work done by Alina in terms of content.
Yes, just to explain him where we got the ideas from, or these criterias or requirements. We are also working with CINDER, which is the International Association of Land Registers, and as well with ELRA, European Land Registry Association, which is based in Brussels. We were following the principles of Declaration of La Antigua from Cartagena from the year 2003, which establishes the main principles that the register has to meet in order to be considered as such. If John, if you can go a little bit so that he can see. So, for example, we consider that the main requirement would have to be, if we can see, okay.
So in a nutshell, what you're doing or what you're attempting to do is create a meta register of registers and define criteria that makes it easy for that meta register to make use of the entries in the actual registries. Is that right?
That's a pretty good guess. Yeah. If you look at the screen now, I'll explain how that model works.
I've seen this, yes.
So the idea that this is showing is, just mute for a second, Lena, and I'll give you back the mic in a sec. The idea is that there's any supply chains already exist. They're functioning. There's trillions of dollars of goods passing through supply chains. We're not creating something that doesn't exist. Okay, so our observation is these things already work to a greater or lesser extent. There are registrars that are legally authoritative registrars, nation state registrars of things like companies and land and trademarks and all these other things. We're not upsetting those or changing those. We understand they exist and they do things already, and they do very important things. And what we think is useful is the ability to look at or understand who is the authoritative registrar for a particular type of thing or good in a particular place or jurisdiction. So that idea of the directory of registrars is that sort of concept, and that's what this colorful wheel in the middle is here is sort of trying to depict. The idea being that these authoritative registrars, the four of them that we're showing here, might register themselves or rather have themselves listed in this directory, and that will enable participants in supply chains to find out whether a fellow participant in the supply chain was duly registered by an authoritative registrar, not one they've just made up. And this is part, though, of a greater body of work, this whole UNTP Transparency Protocol body of work, where we're supporting kind of the elements that are passed between participants in supply chains, in particular the digital identity anchor and how that is established and who establishes it. And you sort of end up with this logic puzzle that says, well, you need to start from an authoritative registrar. Well, what's one of those then? And that's exactly what this eligibility requirements and then the directory kind of thing is. So yes, a key benefit is this idea that you could look up this directory and find out who is the authoritative registrar for this thing in this place. Is it the one that my supply claims to be registered by, and how might I check? And the next thing is to make that machine readable, automated, use credentials and blah blah, right? All those things.
So you're also looking into adding cryptography to the DIA
Take
in the long term?
Take it 2 or 3 steps in a row, and Joe will go to cryptography and all the other
Okay.
stuff in
Okay.
a bit.
Yeah,
But the 2 or 3 steps are we want to understand what exists, right? So we've got some principles that say we can't tell nation states what to do. We're not going to whatever we think is a sensible thing doesn't mean that a country is going to change their mind, right? So we map what exists. We map what they currently do in terms of issuing identifiers and under what conditions and under what law, and what digital artifacts they produce, if any, to allow verification of those identifiers that they've released. So now we have a way of a recipient checking some stuff because there's an authoritative source about what that registrar does. We're also going to write recommendations about what registrars might do to issue authoritative credentials and digital identity anchors and all those things, but we can't guarantee they're going to do it because
of course not. Of course not. Yeah.
But that's part of the recommendation that we're going to be writing. That's way more than enough of me talking. So, Alina, sorry, back to you.
Yes, but then the next step would be that certain UN member states would develop and implement a pilot, which is, of course, for now we have Spain, Canada has also joined, Australia, and India.
Yeah, this bit here.
So as John was saying, we were now to begin with, we were working on the eligibility criteria, like in order that the national registers or authoritative register would be able to join the GTR. Of course, we have to first think what is a register or what is an authoritative register, just to make sure that because imagine we've got not all the UN member states meet the same standards in order to what is an authoritative register. But of course, we cannot close the gate to whatever they might call as an authoritative register. So we have to be friendly to all the legal frames and leave the door open to all the UN member states so that they are able to register their national authoritative register, whatever that might be. So this is the main idea, not to close the door to anybody, but on the other hand, not to leave it open to all sorts of entities that are not a proper authoritative register. If you get my idea.
And it means, Hans, that entities like Life, and even I know you're working with verifiable trade or for verifiable trade, what we see this project is doing is being an and a way that the projects can work with each other.
John, you have a nasty echo behind you. I'd love to understand what you say, but it becomes harder if you.
Okay,
if you
cool.
have that.
It's okay. Well, the echo will have disappeared momentarily. Back to the plot. So what we did a few weeks ago, in fact, you'll see it in the meetings folder, there's a discussion on Glyph, on the UN CEFACT low code. We could have done verifiable trade as well, to be honest, and considered how does this project work with those projects? What is it that we do that is a synergetic kind of additive quality thing? And I genuinely think that what we're trying to do shouldn't undermine any business models and initiatives that others are doing. It adds a source of truth, if you like, to what they're already doing, a way of cross-checking things or double-checking things, or another way to verify something. So it shouldn't be, I hope, in any way a disruptive to existing sort of plans and investments that people are making.
There is no business model behind verifiable trade. Verifiable trade is a not-for-profit, and the goal set of this project here in verifiable trade is quite concurrent. Okay.
Yep.
There is no business behind verifiable trade. The business is on top, on the layer that verifiable trade is trying to bring about. Verifiable trade is trying to convene the industries to conceive a protocol that allows authentic data exchange, in a nutshell. So what you do here is pretty good and walking into the same direction. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I agree with you, Hans.
The only doubts I bring along is that the way you are approaching this problem is producing tangible results in the time frames that we need them in. That's just.
So we are talking about the United Nations here. So delivering results in timeframes is interesting. So but therefore we've set our sights on I think genuinely meaningful, but not impossible to achieve. But what in reality what we'll have to do as a project is write recommendations that will be reviewed in July 2026, and if they're accepted, then there's a program of work that would be established to actually build the thing we've recommended is built. And we can't over specify the thing to be built, because otherwise there'd be kind of a whole bunch of things to be reviewed, and we can't make it too detailed in terms of impositions on countries and so on. So there's a sort of interesting bootstrapping process to get through to get to something that actually delivers value. But I do think we can deliver value in probably 18, 24 months is what I'm thinking. I'd love it to be faster, but it's UN CEFACT plenaries and stuff, so we've got those deadlines. Alina, sorry, back to you. Your mic.
Yes, as you were saying, recommendations are not mandatory, and they have to be really general and global because they have to apply to all UN member states. So you're right, we cannot go dig into deep details, unfortunately. So coming back to the document, we were working on these legal requirements that the authoritative register would have to meet, at least the minimum requirements that they would have to meet in order that the authoritative register would be considered as such and able to register in the GTR. So this is the first. We divided the draft in different sections. The first one, if you can go back, please, John, to so the first one is on the eligibility requirements. The second section, qualities of registered data. There, I don't know if we do anything there yet. Not so really.
The idea on that document is that we're considering what do we need to know about registrars.
Okay. And the third one on digital identity anchored data structure and schemas. And I was working on the legal requirements that the digital identity anchor would have to fulfill or meet, because there are technical requirements, but as well legal requirements. If we can have a quick look at the document as well. So then the scope and the definitions are the same for each of this, for all sections. Of course, the main thing is who is issuing. The most important thing is, or question, who is issuing the digital identity anchor? It would always have to be an authoritative register. Who is issuing is a very important or a key question.
Yeah, and that. Actually, you go to in the fourth document that you've been working on.
Yes.
This one here. We introduce UN body.
Of course, because a UN body would have to be in charge of the governance requirements and of the admission, for example, admission of the authoritative registers of the UN member states. We did not establish yet who is this UN body. That's why for the moment we just name it UN body. But most likely would be UN CEFACT.
And again, for Hans's benefit,
of course, the member state would have to vote on this at the plenary.
We're leaving that blank deliberately.
Yes.
So that's what I know you've been doing. Just go on mute while I say this for a second, Alina. What I know you've been working on is if you look through this governance requirements document, you'll see that there is a section that appears later in the document on effectively eligibility requirements, again, eligibility of authoritative registrar. So one of the things Alina's been thinking about over the last few days is how might we merge these two concepts together? Is there a sort of one document approach that might be easier to use than, say, having two documents? I originally promoted the idea of having one document because my head was beginning to spin with all the things that are sort of being produced, but it might be easier to keep them separate until we've got them sort of simpler. And I'll show you why I think that when you see what I've been trying to do in GitLab, which is where eventually all of these documents end up, because that's where the UN CEFACT project spaces are now being hosted. Thank you, Alina. That was what I just wanted to interject. So is that the main thing you've been working on? Those sort of amalgamation of those two documents, the way we might simplify the eligibility requirements. You've given me some suggestions on that. That's the main thing.
Yes, these documents, particularly the last one, the governance requirements. It's a very long document. I agree. And I think we should, some of the paragraphs or sections would have to go in an annex. Then we would have to decide or filter, let's say, what would go in the core recommendation and what would have to go in like technical details would have to go in an annex, because the recommendation, we would have to ask Steve again how long or how many pages it would have to have. We cannot have 100 pages recommendation.
No, I think that would, yes, I think you're right.
So usually they will have to let us know more or less, because the other draft recommendations I was working on in different divisions, they told us maximum these 20 or 30 or whatever pages.
Okay. I think that's right, Wes. So the action for you and I is you've sent me an email with a proposed set of changes. You and I will work out how best to accommodate those proposed set of changes to sort of rationalize the document structure. And we'll do that over the next few days, before the next meeting in 2 weeks anyway.
And just to let Hans know that if you participate in the project, we are open. You can add any comment or whatever you feel like, because this is a team. It's not my and John's draft.
I won't be shy, don't worry.
So everybody has to work, and I would really appreciate that you do.
Jen, we do honestly mean that. So yes, please, thank you, Hans, if you can, please put some comments in. So that's for those three. Joe, I want to get to you, but I want to give you the whole space to the end of the chat. So I'm going to quickly show you what's been making me go a little stir crazy over the last few days. It feels like weeks. I mentioned that UN CEFACT's project space, and Hans, you've been there just recently. There's a hosting environment that they typically provide for projects that's based on an Atlassian instance running somewhere in New York, and it has only 80% availability. Recently, another part of the UN has been creating a UNICC GitLab instance, under which, let me just go to this one. Okay, so this is the GitLab instance that they're running. And if I go right to the very beginning of it, here we have the United Nations, right, running on a GitLab instance in New York, and all the parts of the United Nations, not all of which have working elements of content in here, but the UNECE does, and of that, the UN CEFACT does, because UN CEFACT is curated by, umbrellaed by UNECE. And inside there, you can see these projects that I refer to. UNTP is probably the most mature of these projects. UNTTP is the textiles extension for UNTP. So it's an extension they're working on for UNTP. There's a template for UNTP type projects. There's a verifiable trade documents thing that's specifying what the schemas and data structures might be for verifiable trade documents. You might be interested in that, Hans, by the sound of it, possibly, right? And there's a low-code sort of vocab sort of site being set up too. So each of these sites, if I go to spec UNTP, is a GitLab environment. It looks like GitHub, looks like Git, basically. It's a content versioning control management system type thing. But most people aren't coders, and most of these projects aren't developing code, but we're in an environment that's actually friendly for coders, what most of these documents end up being are markdown documents. So here we'll find a specification. Eventually, I'll get down to the specification of the digital identity anchor. Here you go. This is the markdown document that is the digital identity anchor spec inside UNTP at the moment. Now that text is readable to those people who like reading markdown and commenting and being part of that whole space. But for many, that's not easy to understand. So what they do is they publish a website, and the website that they publish is using a thing called Docusaurus to publish the content of a Git. I've already said too many things. So basically, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to fork anything. They have a website that's running. We have two. So this page you're seeing now is our CEFACT Global Trust Registry project hosted on GitLab, where I put a few of the documents we've already created into the environment, and I'm now able to sort of share content via the UNICC GitLab space. And it was a pain in the ass to get there, I have to say. But if I go back to the CEFACT thing, I'll show the Global Trust Registry. You're laughing. I like it, Hans. It's good. I wasn't joking.
Can imagine.
So that means that the docs that we're talking about, the deliverables docs, now have this sort of structure. So it looks the same, right? Absolutely awful getting there, but it's the same sort of idea. These are markdown versions of the same documents we were looking at on the Google Drive. However, to get here, you need a login to UNICC. You need to apply for a login to UNICC and do a number of other things, become familiar enough with editing content inside a GitLab environment, promoting a merge to be reviewed and then to be accepted and so on. So my thoughts are, for those of us who wish to say sane, we stay here at the moment in the Google space, working on documents and simplifying them. And as and when they are mature and stable, I'll move them into the GitLab environment. But the experience has taught me many things. Patience is probably one of them. But the one thing it taught me was that having these documents in parts is not such a bad idea. So having the about section separate to the other sections, having glossary separate as a document, this actually makes it easier to reference documents within documents inside a Markdown and GitLab environment. So that might lead me to think about how to manage these documents in another way. So that's what I've been doing this week. This week I've mostly been doing that. I'm going to go back to the deck, and I'm going to hand over to Joe. And unless anybody else has any updates that they wish to share, I'll quickly get through this. Hans, in particular, there are forms available to fill out if you wish about pilots. If there's a pilot you think, Alina mentioned pilots to do with the Netherlands, which Harman has been promoting. Canada, which is to do with critical raw minerals, British Columbia. India, who are, again, nice to see you online as well again today, and Spain are all putting their hands up as interested in pilots. And we've got a forms if you wish to others to sort of say they'd like to participate as a person helping the pilot run. They may have some ideas about use cases, and they can promote ideas about use cases through a form. These forms are available to you. The links are in this deck, and you can click on the link and you go to the form. And there are some ideas about the benefits that might result from running a pilot, or that the use case will demonstrate. They hope to demonstrate that that use case exists. Now, Joe, I think I can stop and hand over to you.
Respect, John, for going through that GitLab experience, should we call it? That's terrific. Look, I have a question actually before I start. We use the term card. Are we now using the term grid, or are they equivalent, or are they different?
I've got problems with version control of my own, right? So card was the name we came up with before we came up with grid. I think grid's better than card.
I think grid is better than
global
card.
Change and replace of card.
But the problem is I refer to card as well. So apologies for that in advance, and that's my mistake. Listen, what I've been thinking about is really the technical design considerations, and when you think about technical design, you think about concept design, logical design, and then implementation. And what that means is you find it easier to actually sort of think about what we're actually trying to achieve, and what's the concept that we're actually trying to provide. And that's where all the good stuff that John and Alina are doing in terms of the requirements and the outcomes and the expectations and the organization and the governance need to feed in. The logical design then is taking that information and trying to work out, okay, so if that's the case, what are the major components, the major capabilities, and so forth, and therefore we come down to componentry about what we're actually looking to develop, and a large portion of that is dependent on obviously the requirements that John that Alina's coming sort of creating. The challenge then comes to, okay, so in a global trust registry environment or a grid scenario, what does that mean from a technical implementation? And that's the sort of journey that as an architect that's what we tend to think about, and we try to be led by the business demand, but we don't often do that. So if you want to flip to the next slide, John. So if we think about card or grid scope and governance demand, determines actually the technical capabilities we need. Now I've sort of identified them there in a sort of if you like a phased or a core and extension sort of capabilities that we might think about. As we say, the grid it's primarily, it provides directory services associated with trust registries and what it is that they provide. And so therefore, we have to onboard registries, we have to recognize them, we have to allow them to be recognized, we have to register them, and we have to maintain if you like, the directory that is the underpinning capability that we're going to create. Again, if anything is unclear or you have any questions, please just reach out. Just raise your hand or just shout. I'm not that worried about being interrupted. But in essence, we have to have a process of providing, if you like, accessible services that registries can actually sort of self-register, and we can help register for them as an operating entity managing the grid. So therefore, we have to have registry recognition. We have to have a process of saying, for each country, these are the registries we want to include. We need to have that data curated, and we need the directory data to be stored. We do need to be able to, well, there's no point storing it if you can't inquire upon it. So therefore, we need to externalize queries associated with that information. But all of that needs to be accessible through two mechanisms. One which might be a web-based interaction mechanism, both for the operators of the solution, that's the internal operators of the solution, but also for registers themselves to actually manage their registry directory entity or record, should we put it that way, and accessible to others who are just using it for a query function. Now that's fine. We've established the directory service. That's does that sound reasonable to everyone? If anyone's got anything they want to mention, just please come in. Tell me.
I think it sounds sensible to jump in. I would, because I'm your friend and colleague. But also, no, we have disagreed in the past on things. But
no, we do.
The analogy I'm thinking of is the ICAO PKD thing, which we've looked at before, and even sort of low code. Do you think it has similarities to, say, the PKD thing? Is that? I think
the challenge is, the only thing that we see around the PKD is that the PKD actually distributes the information to the various different users of that information. The mechanism of actually using the PKD is different potentially to the GTR. We're not distributing the GTR information. We're actually potentially curating it centrally. We may distribute it in future if that makes it easier to actually utilize, and that's a challenge. But at this point in time, I'm just thinking about the establishment and management of the directory itself. Does that make sense? We can come to how we then distribute that and how then it becomes useful. The problem I see in this case is that the PKD is fairly static. Our information may be quite dynamic, and we'll need to think about the implications of that. But having established the directory, we need to be able to help consumers of registry information to actually access registry information themselves. Now, obviously, that sort of, what is it? A mustard-colored line shows that a direct query between a registry and a supply chain actor, in that case, an industry, or what is it? I don't know what that.
The one I'm pointing to right now?
Yeah.
It's a supply, so that's a supply chain participant. It happens to be a car manufacturer.
Car assembly manufacturer.
It comes from a battery life cycle.
Yeah, fine. So one of those can go directly to the register themselves if they have that capability. However, the grid itself may provide standard query information for the registry directly for the supply chain actor to be able to access the registry information, just purely for inquiry purposes.
So that's interesting, Joe. So you're showing I'll use the powers of this pointer, this thing here, if that's working for people.
I can't see the pointer actually, John.
All right, okay, let's switch it on. Disappearing ink. Oh
yeah, got it now. Yeah,
got it now. Okay. Cool.
I'm looking at number 3.
Okay, this one. Cool. Oh shit.
Oh,
that's 3.
So number 3 is a query.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's a query directly of the grid itself. However, if you need to be able to query registries that don't actually make information particularly easy to access, it could well be that the grid itself provides a protocol to actually bounce off number 5.
I've got you. Okay, now I think I've got you. Yeah. So let's give names to our fictitious model.
Standards.
Let's say the Bahamas. We all like to go into the Bahamas. It's a nice place. So if we imagine the Bahamas has got a registry of companies, which it does have,
yeah,
but it's got a particular way of presenting that information, which is not necessarily easy to access online. We'll just imagine that to be true. I don't know if it is true, by the way. But the Bahamas is able to enter its information in the sense of it is this registrar, it's this process, this thing into the directory. And the directory can be queried for information about the Bahamas thing. If not the detail of the content, to the Lena's point earlier, we're not keeping the data kept by the registrars in our directory, but we're keeping some metadata, to use Hans's comment, that might make it useful for participants to verify stuff. So
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So in essence,
you're not replicating all the directories of the world.
No, absolutely not.
That would mean you present a centralized database for all the registry, for all the elements.
Just imagine the maintenance overhead, Hans.
That would be madness.
Absolutely madness. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to make these registries accessible. Right. So if we wanted to, we could develop a standard query protocol, and there are standard query protocols that are being developed to enable the grid to be, if you like, an intermediary to support that sort of interfacing. Now, I'm not saying that this is what we want to do, but it's a possible.
So you'd be aiming to support real-time queries through the meta registry into the national registers.
Potentially.
What Joe's doing here, Hans, to be clear, is proposing ideas that we need to think about, rather than solutions or decisions we've made. It's the kind of thing, to use Lena's point earlier, we're going to write a set of recommendations which will say this is both possible and useful, and it is possible in a number of ways, and its usefulness has a number of sort of stages of maturity, a roadmap, if you like. Yeah, so along that roadmap might be it could act like this.
We don't know at this point in time, but it's like a service agent for the accessing registries that aren't otherwise very easy to access.
May I ask some potentially daunting questions?
Of course.
What's in it for the registries?
Access and utilization. Yeah, utilization of their information.
Do they care? Do they care?
They probably.
I'm playing the devil's advocate.
No. It's absolutely. It's a really good point. As if you like, supply chain, because we're all worried about trade and supply chain. As trade and supply chain initiatives become more widely usable, it could well be that the registry themselves becomes the controlling factor. And so therefore, if they want to play in those initiatives, they have to care.
I agree. I agree to what you say. They would have to care. Let me correct that a little bit.
Yeah, they would have to care. Yeah.
The experiences I made with these people or institutions is very, very daunting. Yeah.
What we're saying though is that the mechanism by which they're made available could be enhanced using the grid and the GTI initiative. That's all we're saying. We're not saying they have to. It could be that they're always going to be off the grid, and I quite like this. It's working for me. And that means that if you want to be able to access their information or verify the identifier that's being presented, you have to do it in a way that isn't technically integrated.
So your question about what's in it for them is a very important one, obviously, Hans. Otherwise, if there's nothing in it for them, then you can't imagine many countries signing up to this. So we have thought about that question, and there's a number of benefits that are in that benefits list, if you like, that we think that accrue for registrars. I mean, we have a registrar on the call right now. Elena represents the registradores of Spain and Land Asset Registry, and her colleagues have often been in these calls too. So there are registrars that see this as beneficial. Now, why might they do?
John, it's not only countries that you have to talk about, and Spain may be a good example, or the good example. I met Elena in Geneva, and I asked her a question in public. The question was, do you know how many business registers there are in Germany? And it was an unfair question, but the answer is 176. So you're not talking to Germany if you're trying to get things moving. You're talking to local courts.
Well, that's no doubt that's correct. Okay, and in a sense, my response is, so what? That's Germany's problem, not our project's problem.
It's a problem.
Just a second, Hans. No,
but
this is not correct. The exact question was, how many business registers do you have in Spain? And we only have one, because the organization is decentralized. We do have 60 offices, but we only have one, which is the business register.
I want to go back to this point, because I don't deny the reality of countries having complicated systems. That's okay. That's their situation, and we are not changing reality. So if Germany has a complicated situation, there are consequential impacts of that for Germany, right? Not my problem to solve, right? But we can map the problem. 176 isn't very many to list in a directory, right? Directories typically have thousands of things in them, so it's not a big number. And what we're doing is making those self-managing. So we ask the country, UN representative of Germany, what are your registrars for businesses? They tell us there's 176 of them. We go, oh, that's an interesting number. What are the contact details for each of those? And so on. But we don't take the burden on ourselves of sorting out the problem for Germany.
That as well is an interesting design consideration, because in essence you're talking about someone being responsible for multiple registries. So if we're going to allow people to maintain their own grid record, it's complicated. It gets complicated.
Anyway, that sort of problem is where you need to you work out how to best answer the problem for that particular country. But back to the incentives. Why might any registrar, regardless of being one of 176 or one of one, want to participate in this global scheme? Now, several of the reasons are reputational risk. In other words, companies are claiming to be registered by this registrar, but they are not. And this is a problem for the country. It gets a bad reputation. Or perhaps the country, I'll finish in a second, okay? Or the country has a desire to be perceived as more trustworthy than it currently is perceived, and therefore it wants to start providing a more professional sort of approach to the way it registers things, therefore it's going to do this thing. Because the ability to trade and be used as a trade base by countries is an important asset in global sort of GDP. The other thing, some registrars actually charge a service for providing information, and we don't want to disabuse them of that, don't want to make that not possible. So we might be driving traffic towards what is a revenue earning part of their business. Now it's up to the relying party to decide whether to pay the fee. We can't either change or demand fees are made or whatever through this registry directory. But if that registrar does charge a fee, then so be it.
And we should probably recognize that as well.
It's made in the directory. It says there will be a fee if you wish to find out. That's okay. The idea is by making things transparent, which is the whole ethos of both UNTP and this project, better things happen than if you make them opaque.
Anyway.
Alina, you had your hand up. Sorry.
Yes, from my perspective as a land register, I'd like to distinguish regarding the advantages you were both referring to. GTR on one hand and the digital identity anchor, no advantages for each. Like if the Spanish land and business register would join the GTR as a main advantage, I would see that currently in Spain there are many fake domains which are not ours, like registradores dot whatever. And what do? They sell certificates, online certificates. We do not know if those certificates are original or fake or whatever. And then they charge like 3 times the fees that we do officially. So this would be one advantage, because when we disclose information, it's not for free. We charge a fee to disclose for these certificates. So we would avoid all these massive problems that we have. And I would bet that in other countries, they probably have the same problems with these fake domains on one hand. And from the digital identity anchor point of view, currently we do have an identifier, for example, in the business register. It's called IRUS or IRUS, but it is not verifiable and it is not global. We only issue it, this identifier, the business register issues it for businesses, but it is not linked to cryptographic signatures, so it's not verifiable. What the advantage would be in this case when implementing or creating the digital identity anchor is that we would build on it. We would not destroy the existing system or credential. We would build on it and make our identifier verifiable and global. But of course, we do have red lines. We do not disclose information for free. We do not grant access to our database under no circumstance. This is like red lines that we have.
Joe, you had another slide to go through, I think.
No, that's absolutely right. I did want to sort of so assuming we could provide some registry access services, in effect, helping those registries that are struggling to make themselves available. Certainly, the principal purpose that this was linked into UNTP and probably the verifiable trade is around the DIA verification process. And to do that, you have to have an access to a register of whitelist, the register whitelist as defined in the DIA specification. Now, it could well be that that is for a specific purpose. We would probably make that a specific whitelist for, say, whether it's battery supply chains or other types of supply chains. You might have different registry lists for different purposes. But the fundamental point is that the GTR could actually evolve into something more than a grid, but actually provides that discovery, resolution, and verification of DIAs itself for supply chain sort of types of implementations. What I would say is, and this is really important, is that the solution that we're trying to build will more likely look like something that's already been created by the owner of the grid as it goes forward. Now, the point here is that if it were ICAO, then it might look like the ICAO services that already exist, but they just create a new version and see whether they can actually sort of just work from that. Until we know who it is that's going to own the grid as it's going to be implemented, the platform design and solution selection will be primarily made as a result of who owns the solution going forward. Just going to the next slide.
Are you hang on? Are you talking? Yeah, are you thinking in the direction of an operator of a trust route?
More an operator of the actual platform itself.
Platform.
So the grid being a platform.
We don't. Your question is very good, Hans. At a point in time, you could imagine that such a directory might become something like Glyph's root of trust for an issuance of VLIs or something. But that's not our ambition at the moment. We don't intend to do that at the moment. It's a possible future, but we don't.
Yeah, but I don't know. But as long as the second lag, the one running from the meta registry to the national registries, as long as this is not verifiable because there's no cryptographic technology in the national registers, you have to kind of create other ways of making.
That's exactly right, and that's where the DIA. That's why the DIA comes in, because the DIA itself is a credential that is.
But it relies on a trust root, or relies on a reliable source.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Now there are mechanisms by which secondary issuers can actually exist, because we're not going to get all registrars up to being able to do their own issuance of credentials. So the question here is, for those that can actually do their own credential issuance, that's absolutely fine. Let them do it, and they will do that. For those that can't, then there might be a space for something like the extension of the grid that we were talking about to actually provide these DIAs for them. Now, it might well be the grid, it might be multiple different service providers. But in essence, we need to know who's the whitelisted issuer as well as the whitelisted register. So that's an evolution challenge that we've got.
Now, I'm going to interject quickly. It's 2 minutes after the hour.
Harman's got his hand up. And
Harman's got his hand up. So Harman, we should hear you because you've been very quiet. And I'd like.
Yeah, well, I was traveling, so sorry for kind of getting off camera. But just very briefly, and we can talk about it later on. But I think, Joe, what you're referring to, isn't that a trust list of all the business registries in the world that are able to or are allowed to issue a digital identity anchor?
That will be part of the grid. So
exactly.
that would be a part of the metadata associated with each one of those registers. Yes, that's exactly right, Harman.
Okay. And just maybe commenting, I mentioned that also to John and Alina. We are actually doing something exactly that. with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce and also some others, where we're literally kind of trying to prove the mechanisms that I think are exactly also what we're trying to do here. So yeah, I mean, if people are interested, we can show that sometime in upcoming weeks.
I think we should allow time for people to present what they're working on, and that goes for all people on the call, actually, yourself as well, Hans, and Herman in particular. I think the quick kind of reality check. It is now 3 minutes past the hour. We will have another call in about something like 17 hours time. That we're having to shift around with time zone shifts for daylight savings time. And we'll have another one in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime, you're all very welcome to communicate asynchronously, emails, chats. There's a group email address list that you can send questions in through, or on these documents you can put comments. Very quickly on that last sort of discussion point, there are countries who have no digital capability to issue any verifiable certificate of any form. They may still have a legally representative, authoritative registrar that writes things on paper and gives them in the post to recipients. They can still be listed in our directory.
Exactly.
Okay, we don't have to digitize the world to make this work. If it turns out that is still a very useful thing to list in the directory, because if someone is looking at what claims to be a verifiable credential from a country that doesn't issue verifiable credentials, that's a bit of a red flag.
And it may well be that registrars or registries will have to actually issue DIAs in various different forms for specific purposes as well. So knowing that they can do those sort of things is really important, and the metadata underneath each registry is going to be very important for us.
So many questions.
The background of, am I supposed to raise my hand before I speak? Or?
No, carry on.
You know, the background of all the work that is done here is enhancing programmability of supply chain logic.
That's important.
So it's not about human beings in offices verifying if some registry entry is correct. It's about a machine doing that.
So you're right, and we know you're right, but we can't write a recommendation that says all countries must have this capability, because the countries will not accept it because they don't have it. So what we need to write is a recommendation that says this is where the future is, and it's a good future. You're not all there yet, but we can get you all on the directory and we can help you on the journey. If we make the jump too high, they won't jump.
And to be honest with you, Hans, what we can say is whatever we put in now will evolve over time too. So we've got to be able to reflect how things change over time, and they don't always happen, they change at the same time. So we've got to be able to support multiple mechanisms for DIA utilization at the same time. So it's managing that evolution over time is the important thing, which might be from physical to digital or more digital. Yeah, sorry, go.
Alina, we should probably let you go last.
Yes, excuse me, Joe, maybe it's a stupid question, but I was just wondering, what exactly is the data that when verifying the digital identity anchor, we would have access to? Would it work in a similar way like Breeze does? Or if I want to verify the digital identity anchor, to what data would I have access to? This is the question.
Well, it depends on who's actually accessing the who's actually issued the DIA itself. Sorry, can you put yourself on mute? I've really struggled with things. It depends who's actually provided the DIA itself. If we are actually the issuer of the DIA, then obviously we can provide. But in essence, if we understand what the DIA is, we can provide verification services. It's like any other relying party, right? That actually verifies a credential. And then
yes,
you look
but when I verify the credential, what data do I have access to? Does it work like Breeze does? Because when through Breeze you have access to minimum data regarding the companies.
So the idea of and the UNTP spec, the United Nations Transparency Protocol spec, from which we get the current digital identity anchor specification, the idea of things like selective disclosure is considered. It isn't made obvious in the sense of explicitly how to achieve this, but it's recognized as a necessary condition for trade, that participants may wish to not provide full disclosure to all upstream or downstream participants from their position in the supply chain. But with respect to the verifiable credential of a digital identity anchor, it is most likely that all of that information is, in a sense, self-standing, cryptographically protected and signed data. So the resolution of that data tells you what's inside the digital identity anchor. And you can tell it's not been tampered with, you can tell who signed it, and so on. You don't need to access databases of other people to find out that.
That's the cryptographic proof that it is a DIA is done as part of that process. That's the normal relying party access verification of credentials.
Inside that DIA, it might claim, I'm a company from Spain, and I've been registered by the Registry of Doors. Now, if you wanted to double check this, for some reason you needed to find another source of proof of this thing, then you might need to go through to the Registradores of Spain and look up the identifier and cross-check data, or do whatever it is you find you need to do because you have reasons to worry about things. So there's sort of, each verifiable credential is effectively self-standing.
Yes.
But you then might find out information that makes you want to, as they describe in the UNTP protocol, traverse the transparency graph. You kind of work your way around the information that is available.
The only service that we would be looking to provide is actually saying whether the data you've got as the actor in the supply chain is actually verified. It's actually a verifiable, has been issued by the registry that it says it has, and that's the only thing we're doing. We're actually not doing anything to do with the access to the data or anything like that. We're just saying that is a verified credential that you've been given.
It's about data provenance, nothing else. Yeah?
That's all it is. We're not accessing data. We're not doing anything else. We're just saying the thing that you've been presented with is verifiable. That's all. Because we don't have the information, we don't have access to the information. We just sort of say whether in fact this information was issued by the registry that it says it was.
And with that, I think we need to both stop and carry on the conversation. It's now 11 past the hour, so my apologies, but it's been very interesting and animated, which is great. So there will be minutes of this meeting, and there will be continued discussions on these topics. We very much welcome them on the slide deck, on the documents, in emails, and so on. And in 2 weeks' time, there'll be another meeting of this time of day, where we can all perhaps discuss our thoughts since this meeting. So thank you all very much. For some of you, I'll see you on the next call in a few hours' time. Others, I'll see you over the next couple of weeks, and in 2 weeks' time, I hope.
Great stuff.
Okay, bye-bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.